Today is Friday, May 2nd, 2025, and welcome to the Chapter 49 podcast. Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. My name is Larry Lannan. I'm a retiree and a volunteer in communications for Chapter 49. So let's welcome back our Chapter 49 president, Duncan Giles.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
And we once again are honored to have the national president of NTEU, Doreen Greenwald, coming to us from Washington, D.C. So, Doreen, welcome once again. Always wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you. I love getting an invite, and I always look forward to our times to chat a little bit and update everybody on what's going on. So thank you.
Well, speaking of updates, there are plenty of those, and I'm going to let Duncan Giles ask the first question.
Yep. And, Doreen, as myself and my brethren get all these questions, first one we're going to start with is, and I know it's tough to narrow this down, about the status of court cases. What's going on with the court cases right now, and how does that impact NTEU?
So really, to give an update on the court cases is kind of like if I run to my door, it changes. That's how. So what you may have realized, we've pushed ourselves, our Office of General Counsel, who I have to give a huge shout out for. I mean, they are serious rock stars when it comes to defending NTU members. They care about this in their heart and soul. We have the best legal minds on our team, and they are bringing just an excellent fight forward to take on these attacks on the federal workforce in general. And so on a weekly basis, on Mondays, you get a roundup. Every member is getting an update about what's happening in the court cases, so people are kept apprised of what's going on. And that's written by our legal team to put it in the most simplest terms so people can understand it and are getting it from us. One of the biggest things I'm always concerned about is people are getting information sometimes on social media. I'm seeing weird stuff posted on Reddit. Please pay attention to stuff you get from your union, NTEU, and from your chapter leaders, because that is real information. Some of the stuff that's being posted outside of social media is not necessarily based in fact, and sometimes is controlled by people who are trying to create an alternative narrative that is just not helping our folks and trying to build that anxiety that they don't need help building. It's all being taken care of itself. Let me just talk about the main case that we have going on. So as we all know, on March 27th, the president issued an executive order that eliminated about 65% of federal unions from having the right to bargain and represent employees based on national security, period. Obviously, we disagreed with that determination. We felt it was very broad. It didn't cover, many of the agencies that were covered have little or nothing to do with national security. And the areas that do have something to do with national security are not covered by our unions. So it makes no sense. IRS being one of the biggest. IRS has had a union for decades, and it's never had an issue with this. So obviously we've, pushed back on this. We filed a preliminary injunction, which means to stay that executive order for people. And we went to court on that, and an opinion issued on Monday, April 28th. And so on that decision, it basically, the court upheld NTU's request for that injunction and said, wait, let's hold off on this executive order till the cases can go forward. And so, as expected, the government did appeal that injunction. And so normally what they do is they go to the judge and then they go to the district court. In this case, they went right to the district court. We saw yesterday the judge basically said, his decision was that the government had met its efforts to eliminate the preliminary injunction that we sought. And so right now we are waiting. We will be having hearings next week. NTU will present its case on why we think the preliminary injunction should stay. The government's asking for a stay. Now, let me try to unconfuse people. So We asked for a preliminary injunction stopping the executive order. They're asking for a stay of the preliminary injunction, meaning they want the executive order to go forward. So just to keep that simple for people. So next week, there's going to be hearings on that, and we will hear some final decisions coming forward, at least on the preliminary injunction. Don't get confused by this, because I've seen this in the news where there's other unions going out there and issuing things, and sometimes they don't get either a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction. That only means that they may not have met that bar for that. It still means the regular case proceeds forward. So when people say, oh, the union's lost, they did not lose. It was a step in the process. And so we'll keep everybody informed as these cases move forward. But right now, as of today, the preliminary injunction remains temporarily in place.
Yeah, Doreen, when I worked as a journalist and did that for a living, covering legal issues had to be the most difficult thing I ever had to do. And I want to give you and your staff credit, your PR staff, your lawyers, because the summaries you put out from your national PR people are excellent and very understandable. But this was clearly a very important step in stopping what's going on with our union as the court system works its way. One thing that Duncan gets questions on constantly, and even myself, looking at our Facebook page, we get all kinds of private questions about a couple of issues that are in the forefront. Because NTEU, as you well know, since the 1990s, we've had Telework and AWS even goes further back than that. Those are two key portions of the contract that have been around for a long time, and that's part of what management has decided to do away with the telework, do away with AWS, even though it's in our contract. Again, that's part of what we're fighting in court. So, we get so many questions on this. Why can't I work telework? Why can't I work AWS? As it's being taken away, orders, some of them are from IRS, some from Treasury, some from the White House, all the way up and down. That's where all this is coming from. So give us just an update on that area, because Duncan and I get so many questions from the membership on that.
100% agree. I get those same questions. And so, I know a lot of people, based on the case that I was just talking about, when the preliminary injunction was placed, people immediately said, oh, good, my telework is back. And they're very separate situations. And so, yes, we have telework in our contracts. The president has issued an executive order requiring people to return to the offices. And so we are fighting that executive order. In order to fight that, we've had to file grievances because it's covered by our contracts. And so we have filed grievances in all of our agencies where these executive orders have impacted the contract. They should be following our contract. That is our fight. And we have to go through the legal process through the grievances that we filed to get that back. The preliminary injunction we just talked about does not impact that executive order. And so one is the right to have a union, to have a collective bargaining agreement, to represent employees, to collect dues, all of those things. That's the injunction we just talked about. The telework impact and the AWS impact is really tied to that executive order, because they're eliminating 410s and 549s because that gives you a day out of the office. And they view that as conflicting with the executive order, with the return to office. And so we are fighting those things. And so it is going to take a while to get through the process to get that back. We feel very strongly about our case. We know telework works. It's been our contract for decades. People have shown that it works. We bargain with the agencies. These are legally negotiated agreements. Some of them have gone to third parties. They are the language itself is reviewed by agency heads before the contract is put into place. So all of this, we believe, is a strong case that these things should be restored and restored quickly. And as a union, we are fighting hard to get those things restored back to people, because we know it's so important in people's lives. It makes sense because you're more efficient on the job. You're able to get your work done, don't have to work with commuting and all those things. You take less leave because you're nearer to appointments and things, or if your kids have stuff, all the things that point to a positive thing. And it's better for taxpayers because we want people and resources doing the work and providing services and less about buildings. And telework allows people to have less of a footprint in real estate so that people are able to have the resources necessary to do those jobs.
And just if I can follow up with one question on that, because I know there are different procedures for different legal issues going on. Some of these take time. This Telework and AWS, this is deals with the contract, so this takes more time. You have to go through the internal process to get to court, because first thing a judge will ask you if you go to court is, have you used the internal process? Unfortunately, that does take some time. So explain why this is taking longer than you or the membership would like.
Well, we're trying to push these cases as fast as possible. And normally, I will tell you, I know there's so much sensitivity around this. Usually, NTEU would put out an information saying we filed a grievance, and then you wouldn't hear back from us until we had a resolution to that grievance. What I've told my team is when we file grievances, we're letting people know. When we have a first step meeting, we're letting people know. When we get a result from that meeting, we're letting people know. When we're moving to arbitration, we're letting people know. So we are really working as quickly as possible. Obviously, it's not as fast as everybody would like instant results on this. And it's so frustrating for employees because they're like, why do we have to follow the rules when they don't have to follow the rules? And the reality is that our case is that they are not following the rules, that they are violating the law, and we have to use the procedures in place to enforce that. If we start breaking the rules and the law, we will not succeed in our efforts. And so, yes, I'm sorry that it's taking longer. We think this will take us some months to get this worked through the system, and we are pushing it as fast as we can.
And let me turn to Duncan and Giles for the next question.
Yeah, and I do want to make a comment on what you just said, Doreen. It's one of those, we're doing what we can. The opposition, so to speak, the administration is pushing back and doing everything they can to delay it as long as possible. Because I think they believe that they know that the final resolution is going to be against them. So I would say that, that's what it is. We're trying to do what we can, but we can only do so much within the parameters as you described. Wouldn't you say that's correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And, understand that this was a campaign promise. And so really, it's not based on anything of necessity. It was a matter of we're going to have, and quite frankly, it was insulting because their messaging has been, we're going to make people come back to work. Let's be clear. The federal workforce has been working, and there's many levels of review of people's work, checking in, they're on systems, they're monitored throughout the day. I hope a lot of people had a chance to catch the town hall last night that was focusing on federal employees who have been removed from their positions. And there's a lot of that goes on because we're trying to kind of push against this false narrative. Telework works. Studies have shown it has worked. Congress has passed laws to expand and to give this as a tool for agencies to use. And let me just add that question because people are like, why aren't you filing a lawsuit about telework? The Telework Enhancement Act really gives some latitude to agencies. And so we've used that latitude to negotiate our telework programs. And so we have to use the procedures in our contracts to enforce those negotiated agreements. And so that's why we have to do a grievance. We have to go to arbitration before we can get to the courts. So I just wanted to be clear with people because sometimes they're like, skip all of those and go right to the end. Fortunately, if we could, we would, but that's just not allowed. Kick us right back.
That's it exactly. Yeah, if we could, we would. Now on to everybody's next favorite topic, the House Oversight Committee and their recommendations that passed, and I do want to emphasize this, out of committee, not out of the House. It passed out of the House committee, and talking about, an increase in FERS contributions for those who were here before 2012, the high 3 versus the high 5. And the one that is really causing a lot of panic now is the elimination of the supplement, especially for those who are doing DRP1 with Vera or Vera and VISP together. Let's hear where you think we are on that and where we might be and what folks can do to impact that decision, those votes.
So many of these things have been proposed over the years on and off, and they have not passed Congress. But understand, we have one party that is now managing the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so it is really critical for our members to pay attention about what is going on in Congress. And the very things that you just talked about, Duncan, are equal to pay cuts for federal employees. And what's really devastating is in this time of flux where people just don't know what's going on with reductions in force and being forced to make career-ending decisions in a week's time, which usually people take months to analyze and figure out what's best for their family. They were asked to make these decisions, and now they're changing the rules of the road. So you don't even know for sure, because when you were asked to make those decisions, the language of what they were proposing wasn't even available, and still isn't, because we're talking about what came out of committee in the House. There's going to be reconciliation between the House and the Senate and what goes forward. And so our legislative action team has put information out to members to make sure they're aware of all these things. And there's action letters on our action center to please reach out to your congressmen, to your senators, let them know how this impacts you as their constituent. They need to hear from people that this is problematic, because even with these savings, it is not going to pay for the tax cuts that they want to give to the top 1%, because they had a goal and they've not reached that goal. And basically they're trying to reach that goal on the backs of federal employees. It's going to impact their ability to recruit going forward. It's going to impact people staying on in the federal government, because they're already getting paid on average 25% less. Now you're messing with their benefits as well, and their ability to retire, which could affect some of these other agreements that are out there. People may pull back. We just don't know what that's going to do. So, to me, I'm sounding a fire alarm. Get on our website, go to Legislative Action Center, issue letters, follow up with a phone call. Even if your congressman or senator say, I don't believe you, I think this is the right thing for our country, make your voice be heard, because ultimately they need to know you don't work in DC, you work where you work. You are their constituent. Their job is to work for you. So you got to make your voices heard, because what happens if they don't hear from anybody, they think, what can we do next? And we don't want them thinking that. Right. We want them to know that this is a difficult vote for them, that they need to have the backs of their constituents. They have to stand up for federal employees who are doing nothing more than adhering to the laws of this country that they helped pass. And they need to have our backs as well. So please call early, call often, and make your voice be heard. Our Legislative Action Center is also set up. You don't have to be a member.
Right.
So if non-members are out there but care about these issues, contact your congressman. Get your family on there. It's going to impact them. You help with your family. It takes a village for us to do all these things. It's going to impact small businesses in our communities, because federal employees put their earned dollars into our communities. So we've got to make sure our voices are heard. We cannot sit down and be silent on this.
Well, that is so well said. And I did watch that MSNBC town hall, and I saw that I really was struck by that one gentleman who worked for the Park Service. And NTEU does represent employees in the Park Service, and he talked about the work that he had been a high school history teacher. He then went to work for the Park Service, loved his job, was let go. He was living in government housing. That was part of the deal. And he couldn't go back to his job even if it was offered to him, because he had to just reorganize his life and move 6 hours away. So there are many impacts that the public will find. And if you like going to the national parks this summer, good luck. I think that was his message there. I want to shift the discussion a little bit, because as we work through all these legal issues, one issue that's been happening is that dues withholding has stopped, at least for now. So the questions that come to us, and I'm sure are we still members without dues being withheld? How can we continue to support the union even though the dues withholding isn't going on? We still want to support NTEU. Well, you're going to charge me back dues if it ever is reinstated. Give us some information on this dues withholding issue, which is tied into all these court cases that you mentioned before.
So one of the big things with the court case is that we have shown a harm to the courts. That's why we went for this preliminary injunction, because through this executive order, the president has ceased our ability to collect dues from our members. And they did that because our dues withholding is covered in our contracts, and they ceased to say we even have a contract. And so we are fighting back to have our status restored, and that's part of this lawsuit. And so the harm that this is causing is directly impacted by this lawsuit, and why we are pushing for the courts to intervene. Right now we are under this the temporary injunction or preliminary injunction. I want to use the right legal terms. For all facts, I am not a lawyer, so let me be clear about that. But what we basically did is, when we got that preliminary injunction, we reached out to all the agencies that ceased dues and said, "Okay, folks, get them fired up again." And so, obviously they're like, "Well, we're checking our team for legal guidance." And there's going to be some back and forth with this as they appeal and we get different rulings from the courts. So right now, our push is to get the agencies to restore dues withholding. We appreciate our members anxious to get their dues paid. We appreciate that everybody understands that dues money is used wisely to make sure that we can fund a great staff that fights on your behalf. We want the government to restore dues immediately. We believe they're obligated to do so. Court has said they're obligated to do so. And so we're going to keep pushing on that issue to make sure that people are aware of that. And that's where our stance is. Obviously, if something goes awry or the courts say something differently, we'll have to look at an alternative. But right now, we believe we are in the right. The court has said they should restore dues, and that's what we're pushing agencies to do. So that's what I would just say as far as members go. Both probationary employees and are long and grateful to everyone who is a member of NTEU. You are considered our members, whether they are taking your dues or not, because this dues stoppage was not caused by you. It was caused by the agencies following this executive order. We believe they now must follow the courts, and that's where our push is. And so hang on with us for a little bit till these courts play out, and then we will put out guidance based on the courts as to what to do next.
And next question goes to Duncan Giles.
Yeah, I do want to follow up. We're not going to be looking to get back dues from the members. Is that correct, Doreen? Because that's one of the questions we keep hearing.
I mean, obviously, our decision, we believe the agencies should pay us the dues.
Yes.
I believe they stopped paying or collecting the dues because they want to wash their hands of the situation. NTU will consider all issues. It's going to depend where we're at in time. But obviously, we don't want to harm our members in any way, shape, or form. And so we'll get more information on that. A final decision has not been made of today, but I'm leaning your way.
Gotcha. And now we come to everybody's favorite, especially on Fridays and late Friday afternoons, the riffs, because they seem to like the Friday afternoon or Friday evening or weekend news dumps to do that. And people come to us all the time, and my brethren across the country, well, who's going to get riffed next? Who's going to get hit? What's going on? And we tell them, and I tell people, I have no idea. I can flat guarantee you that the vast majority of the upper echelon of the IRS has no idea, because this stuff is coming down from above. And so, I just want them to hear it from you, how much information we're getting ahead of time on riffs. Are they doing it correctly, even though we're telling them to do it correctly, that sort of thing.
So, and riffs, when we started seeing in the media that agencies were considering reductions in force, we sent letters to all agencies to say, we expect you to honor our contracts, because our contracts have language in there about how they should proceed with a RIF. And that includes briefing NTEU, providing us information about who's impacted, how many people are being impacted, and then a process to try and eliminate the need for a RIF or identify ways that we can, move other employees to different areas where there's needs to lessen the impact of a RIF, including a VERA, a VSEP, all different processes. That's how we've negotiated RIFs in the past. That's what we expected of this administration. They have not honored that. Quite frankly, IRS itself, its management team, its executive team has been kept out of the loop. It's been the Treasury Department that's created a plan. Only tidbits of that plan has been shared with the IRS. Like right before they're going to do it, there's been some pushback. But we do not know from day to day what's going to drop. What's been interesting is since the agency put forward the offer for the Deferred Resignation Program 2.0, we've learned that many areas within different BODs were denied the opportunity, even though they had, volunteered to take that plan. So what that tells me, and what we've seen with some of the turnover of the commissioner level, there has been a dispute at the top between the efforts of DOJ and the efforts of the Treasury Secretary. And so what we're seeing is there's been some reevaluation of what's necessary to get work done. We still don't know what ultimate percentages they're going to fall on. And I think in different BODs, it may be different. I think it's encouraging that some of these deferred resignations have been denied. We've also heard that some of the probationary employees who were brought back have been assigned cases now to work, which they've been told to sit at their desk and kind of watch paint dry for weeks while getting paid, which was another form of cruelty, in my opinion, because they really want to do the work of the American people. And so, we want everybody brought back and we want them put back to work because we know there's a lot of work out there and the federal workforce is not bloated as they say. In fact, it doesn't even meet the needs of what is all expected under the missions of each agency. And we want federal employees to have the right resources to be successful. And our fear is, as these cuts have not been done with any strategic plan in place, no analysis done of where the work or where there's efficiencies to be gained, this was really a setup to defeat federal employees and make it appear as if they can't do their work, when in fact we know federal employees are the most efficient way to do work and the most knowledgeable to do their work. So I don't have any specific answers on RIFs. We keep asking. We just don't have it. And we do see the Friday drop. It's disheartening to me that federal employees are just kind of waiting always for this shoe to drop. This is no way to treat a workforce. One of our core principles as NTEU is to fight to ensure that federal employees are treated with dignity and respect. And this is the exact opposite of that. And so we're going to keep trying to elevate stories about federal employees because I think the American people are seeing this, and the majority of American people don't support these reductions in force, and they don't support these attacks on the federal workforce. And so it's critical that we're telling our stories, and it's critical that we're reaching out to Congress to try and stop this, because we all took an oath to the Constitution to uphold that Constitution and the mission of our agencies. And we know what's happening here is not okay, and it will damage our ability to do that. So we are trying to fight that in every way we can.
Speaking of telling stories, I just started this book. I haven't finished it yet. It's by a writer named Michael Lewis, who is best known for Moneyball and The Big Short, The Wolf Made into Movies also. He just wrote a book called Who is Government? And it tells the story of very important federal employees doing very important work. And what he found, and the writers that helped him write this book found, I've seen some interviews he's done, is that federal employees, for the most part, we don't really like to toot our horn very much. If people try to compliment us, it's like, well, I'm part of a team, or this person helped. We're not the kind of people who like to say, hey, here I am and I did a great job. And I think it's time to start telling those stories. And I would recommend that book, Who is Government by Michael Lewis. It's worth a read. One last thing I want to bring up, Doreen, in this podcast. Duncan and I started this podcast 5 years ago. When we started this podcast, it was a reaction to COVID-19. At that point in time, most IRS employees were on weather and safety leave. They were at home. So Duncan and I have steered through all sorts of things. You know, the pandemic, returning to work from the pandemic, some of the issues about when the vaccinations became available, all the rigmarole we went through on that legally as well, as far as what we had to do, attestation forms, all those things that we went through. Duncan and I have done our best as weekly as we could make it, trying to keep everybody up to date. So we're very proud of what we've done. Duncan was I have to give him credit. I'll do it again, that he was willing to try this podcast, not knowing if it would work or if anything, if people would even want to watch or listen. But it was his willingness to try something new. But I want to give you a chance at this point, Doreen, to talk about this, because this is our next to last podcast. Duncan is retiring in the middle of May. We have one more podcast tentatively scheduled for May the 8th. So I'd like to give you a chance to just talk about the 23 years of Duncan Giles as a chapter president and his impact on the national union scene as well.
So kudos to both of you for the tremendous podcast. I can't believe it's been 5 years. I know you have a huge viewership. I'm one of them. You really tackle just the everyday issues that people are asking questions about. You break it down for them. You let them know what you have learned. You're honest with them if you don't know. You tell them sometimes the difficult truths that we all need to hear. So thank you, because I think people rely on seeing this weekly, and they're going to miss it going forward. My friend Duncan Giles. Let me try to get through this without being emotional. I am blessed to work with tremendous chapter leaders who fight every day for our members. They don't get paid. They do it out of the goodness of their hearts. They stepped up when they see something going wrong, and they believe they can make a difference for the betterment of the IRS and the workforce. Duncan has been that champion every day of his life. He has given a voice to CSRs on the phone. He was an integral part in the customer service agreement. He is a common sense approach kind of guy. He tries to reach people in the middle to do things that make sense for everybody, so that you can move forward in a way that everybody gets a little something. And that's what negotiations is all about. Neither side ever gets everything they want, but he's always looking out for raising the human side of things and making sure that management has all of the information necessary to make better decisions. And he's there to fight for federal employees when they're not getting a fair shake. And so throughout the years, I came up as a chapter president. I met Duncan through being a chapter president, serving on teams, getting to see his work at our national conventions. Duncan has been a pillar of NTEU. Him stepping away, while he has earned it, he earns years and to celebrate with his wife and do all the great things that he hasn't been able to do because he's been on the clock 24/7. I applaud him and I congratulate him on that upcoming retirement, but he is leaving big shoes to fill. He has left a huge legacy with NTEU, and I will miss my friend and having his feedback and guidance to me on a regular basis. And so I wish him the best. And I want to just let Chapter 49 know that you have been in great hands over the years. We have leaders that come in all different capacities, but Duncan has left everything on the field as it comes to representing Chapter 49 and really uplifting you. And so you should be proud of your leader, because he has given his all and he deserves a great bit of gratitude for what he did. So my big thanks to him.
Well, thank you, Doreen. I'll have more to say in our next podcast about this myself, as for my friend Duncan Giles. So, Duncan, I'm not going to let you say a thing. We've already said it, so you don't have to say anything more. Doreen Greenwald, thank you so much. I know you wanted to come on and talk about Duncan here before he left, and you had a lot of very important comments to make about everything going on, and I'm sure everybody watching and listening got very important updates and everything from you there. So, Doreen, thank you so much for your willingness to come on our podcast on a regular basis. We really appreciate the fact that you were willing to do this. We think this format is a good one because it's where people can, in a relaxed and simple way, discuss what's going on. And you're so good at that. So is Duncan. And so we appreciate your willingness to come on and communicate the way that Duncan and I had always envisioned this podcast to be. So, Duncan, thank you again. And Doreen, thank you so much. And we'll be back with our final podcast May 8th, the way things look right now. In the meantime, thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Doreen. Please be safe and be kind.